to be defeated. So very unfortunate. We're fortunate right now that notwithstanding the regulatory situation that the President has put forward, notwithstanding the roadblocks that he's put in the way, that because largely of hydraulic fracturing and other energy sources, our price at the pump is low. But that is in spite of the President putting in roadblocks on things like Keystone Pipeline. The Crime Victims Fund is something that we've gotten, we've moved the ball forward. And so you understand how this works. You may have seen some of this in the news, but Senator Toomey is moving the ball forward and getting a bill passed that says, this will surprise you, that money that comes into the Crime Victims Fund needs to be used for what? Crime victims, right. Believe it or not, Congress has been getting this money in, and they've been giving a portion, but then they've been using a legislative thing to put it into the black hole. And you've got places, you know, you think of places like Reading City, where there are people that have horrible crimes coming to them. You have shelters there that are underfunded. And Senator Toomey is moving the bill forward to make sure 100% of crime victim money that's collected, this is penalties on criminals and all, that money goes to crime victims. And the last was the correction of, it's a technical thing, was the correction of what they call the SGR, and that would have stopped the doctor rationing that we're already seeing happen because of the Affordable Care Act. Now, some hot issues in Washington, right out of the box. This one is a very, very disturbing one, and it's one we have found all across the state. Senator Toomey held a hearing out in Pittsburgh on this, but there is a huge heroin epidemic here in Pennsylvania. In many cases, this starts out in the legitimate world. We have a problem in the military. We have a problem in the VA. So some guy's overseas and gets banged up, and he sees the doc, and the doc gives him a handful of pills to kill the pain. We all understand that. But what we didn't know medically, as we know today, is how short a window it is for a person physically to get addicted to these opioids. And we have seen this problem explode, and it becomes a major burden on counties throughout Pennsylvania, on people coming in and out of hospitals, coming in and out of clinics, etc. Very, very good problem. So Senator Toomey has been able to get past a bipartisan bill. It's working its way now through the House, which would stop at least one small sliver of that, and that's doctor shopping. Okay, so you go to Dr. A, and they give you a script, and you go to Dr. B, and they give you a script, and the system's not communicating. And what happens is, people start this way. They start, that's where they first start. When they run out of that, the next thing you know, it's a very short trip to them actually using heroin. Because believe it or not, heroin is cheaper than getting the opioid. So this is a very major problem that we've been attacking. Number two, Senator Toomey has been the lead advocate. He has spoken on the Senate floor. He has was on Bill O'Reilly not too long ago about police lives matter. The men in blue matter. Okay, it's tragic to see that when you have some of these situations like in Baltimore, where people then turn and attack law enforcement, what is the net result? Baltimore's murder rate is through the ceiling right now. Absolutely through the ceiling. Why? Because they've attacked law enforcement. You know, there are occasional bad policemen in the world. We all know that. But the vast majority of people that get up and put that uniform on are trying to do good and putting themselves in harm's way a lot. And Senator Toomey is moving that ball forward by, number one, speaking about it, and number two, pushing through federal legislation that would parallel, again, Pennsylvania's law, that would make it a capital offense to willfully kill a police officer. Kill a police officer because he is a police officer. Next thing on that line is Senator Toomey is leading the charge against sanctuary cities. We have the city of Philadelphia. Philadelphia is doubling down, frankly, on being a sanctuary city. Okay, we can't, on the one hand, say that we're going to bring in with limited check refugees and others, but on the other hand, can't say that we're going to have all this screening. On the other hand, but if they go to a city that's a refugee city and they commit a crime, we're not going to turn them over to the authorities. That's got to stop. Federal funding to sanctuary cities has got to stop. Now, on things that Senator Toomey has consistently voted on that we have not been able to push the ball forward, but we'll continue to move forward with. He has consistently voted to defund Planned Parenthood. The funding measures regarding Planned Parenthood, okay, those measures didn't say that they weren't going to spend that money. They said we're going to give it to the actual health service folks in places like Reading. So take it away from Planned Parenthood and give it to people who are actually delivering medical care. He's consistently voted to defund and repeal Obamacare. We know that this president is certainly not going to sign a repeal of Obamacare during his presidency, but God willing, that changes in a year and a half. That's got to be the number one thing on the agenda. Who here has had their medical bills lowered because of the Affordable Care Act? Well, I got to confess, I have, and I'll tell you why. Because as a federal employee, you had to take the federal employees' health benefit plan. That was the law. If you were able to take the federal employees' health benefit plan, you had to take it. With Obamacare, I was now, they changed the law because they had a choice, and so I could do what I had taken before I went to work for Senator Toomey, and that was my military TRICARE. So the guys in my office who make a lot less money than me, they pay more. Because I happen to wear the military uniform, because of the flu, I'm the only one in my office who benefited from Obamacare, and not for the reasons that they were intended. It's because I actually now had an option that I didn't have before, that I could fall back on my military health care. But we all know that's the rarity, and I'm falling onto that not because of Obamacare, but because of a flu in Obamacare. He is opposed to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. He has worked to block the global warming regulations of the EPA. We've had some small success with that in the court. As the earlier speaker mentioned, the regulatory tidal wave has just become overwhelming. The regulators, not only are they promulgating more and more regulation, but they're reinterpreting old regulations in ways that we've never seen before. The last one that we've not been as successful as we would like to be, what we continue to fight for, is repealing some of the president's, what we see as abuse of religious liberties, including, it's hard to think that we live in a time now in which a public enemy is the Little Sisters of the Poor. That the Little Sisters of the Poor have to provide abortion as a part of their health care. It really is a very scary thing indeed. And we'll continue to fight that. We've not been as successful at that as we'd like. So what I had promised is to try to run through my notes pretty quickly and to leave some time for questions. I'll be glad to answer some questions if I can.
Okay, if anybody has a question, I'd like you to introduce yourself and please limit it to a question, please.
Okay. I'm Beth from Kempton, and my question is, if you follow the money trail, what did the sanctuary cities get from being sanctuary cities that makes them want to be them?
Well, I mean, that's a very good question. And what I can say is there's a philosophy among places like San Francisco where they have their view that everybody's equal. All cultures are equal, all religions are equal, all people are equal, and they also have a view that the United States should not, When I was younger, we spoke about illegal aliens. That was the word, aliens. And then it became illegal immigrants. They just speak of immigrants. In other words, there's no distinction between someone who came over the border legally and illegally. And because in their mind there should be no distinction, that any of those distinctions are because of prejudices or racism or whatever, they believe that is the overwhelming thing that means that they're not going to turn over people. The second thing is the original concept for the sanctuary part has now been, so there originally was an idea that, let's say if there was an illegal immigrant and the person was pregnant and had a child, they wouldn't go to the hospital. And so they didn't want to discourage people from doing something like that if they thought, if you go to the hospital, have my baby, and be arrested. So it starts out with a little narrow thing, and then it becomes a thing where, well, he's only committed 4 felonies, I'm not going to turn him over, So there's two things. There's the philosophy, and then it starts out in a small way, and then grows into something that defies all common sense.
My name is David Alder, and my question is about the military. Do you know anything about HR 148, which allows the military to speak from their religious beliefs, like they're trying to get rid of the chapters in the military, but it's okay to talk if you're a Muslim, but you can't talk if you're a Christian?
Yeah, I am not aware of that bill. So generally, I mean, I am aware of the concept because I am an officer myself. I know what the background is. Senator Toomey, I can say, I don't know enough about that bill because basically we generally don't look at a House bill, an HR, until it comes to the Senate. We look to see if there's a Senate companion bill, but the truth is there's so many issues and there's so much stuff in Washington that we don't generally look at a bill until it comes up. But I can tell you in general, Senator Toomey is a big advocate of religious freedom. So I understand what the issue is. We haven't seen that bill. We're not on the Senate Armed Forces Committee, but conceptually, Senator Toomey does believe that people should have certain religious freedoms, and we also have to look at common sense. You have to look at what's the context and what we're talking about. But I know many in the United States Army Chaplain Corps that are concerned with that issue.
Hey, my name is John I. from Perry Township. What is Senator Toomey's policy on the national right to carry law?
Well, Senator Toomey was a co-sponsor of the Constitutional Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act.
Any chance of getting it passed in the near future?
Well, there is a guy called Barack Obama still in the White House. But one thing that I don't like to do, because even with your speaker talking about the budget, people will ask all the time, what's the chance of X, what's the chance of Y? And the way in which things are currently work in Washington, or don't work in Washington, and the same thing we're seeing in Harrisburg, I don't like to speculate on that. Senator Toomey absolutely supports that.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Pellegrini. I work as a financial advisor, and I bring that to your attention because prior to the ACA, trust income had been taxed at one rate, and since then it's not as favorable. And my question to you is, are the politicians down there in Washington, D.C. aware of the fact that trust income is sometimes being put aside for children's college education and for special needs children? And so therefore, they're kind of shooting themselves in the foot. Are they aware of this? What are they planning on doing about it?
To be honest, I don't know about that particular provision, but I'd be glad to. And it may well be that our healthcare staff is aware of that part of it. There are lots and lots of bad things about the so-called Affordable Care Act, and there is very little common sense at all. Very little common sense at all in our tax code. that Senator Toomey voted against the bill that created the special committee back, the 3-4 years ago. That he voted against that because he believed it was Congress's obligation to pass a budget. Notwithstanding that, he was put on that committee. He was the only one on the committee who came up with a budget. And his budget would have lowered the tax rates, brought in greater revenue. But one of the things, and this is coming up to this one, there's nothing that makes sense in Washington. There's approximately $4 trillion, $4,000 billion of U.S. company profits sitting overseas. But because we are the only industrialized nation in the world that taxes it at a very high rate. If you're General Motors, if you're Exxon, whatever, you make a profit in India, and you're going to get taxed 35% to bring it into the United States, what are you going to do? You're going to leave it in India. So my point is, even on that, where Senator Toomey said, let's just, I know I can't get it to zero where it is in many places, like England. But let's maybe bring it down to 5%, and we know these corporations will bring millions and millions and millions back, and we can get a little back, but we'll spur the economy. No, it's not fair. So I don't know that particular provision, and I'd be glad to, Leanne has my contact information, whatever. If you want to shoot me an email, I'll get you an answer. But just because something doesn't make common sense doesn't mean you can sell it in Washington. I know that's surprising.
Yeah, next question here. Randy Tolman, Lehigh County. Senator Toomey is a banker by trade. He was on Wall Street. He was owner of a bank that he founded on a board in Lehigh County, so he understands finance, I would think, rather well. What does he have to say about what Yellen's doing with the Federal Reserve, and what's he going to do about that corrupt system and the $20 million, and I've heard numbers as high as $700 trillion in derivatives in the open market across the globe. I want to know what he's going to do about that corrupt Federal Reserve down in Washington, D.C. Don't you think it's killing the families because they took away the interest rate for the banking system? I don't hear him say anything about that. He hasn't joined Ron Paul, and I want to know why.
Well, if you haven't heard, then you haven't listened, that'd be number one. Number two, Senator Toomey is consistent, spoken about the false keeping down of the rate and manipulation by the Reserve, and he has grilled Ms. Yellen about that. The one thing that I think that, respectfully, sir, in the way in which you did your question, the one thing that we do, we look at someone and we say, well, I agree with the 95%, but here's one thing that I don't agree with, and so therefore, I'm going to stay home. You know what? That's why we have a Democrat governor in Pennsylvania. That's why we have a Democrat Auditor General, a Democrat across the board. We've got to, I'm not criticizing you having your opinion, and I'm not criticizing you for pushing it. You should. You should always make sure your voice is heard. But I'm not going to stand here to take like as if we're not doing something. Senator Toomey is one of 100, and he has pushed against that, and he has wailed against quantitative easing from day one. We've created a false bubble by artificially, and what's that? And so we have turned over the whole. You said you do some planning and investment. We've turned over the whole. The whole basic formula forever and ever was, be in equities when you're young, and when you're older, you want secure. Well, how can you tell an older and retired population to be in banknotes, et cetera, so if they're going to get 0.5%? You can't even touch inflation. But the manipulation by the Federal Reserve is out of control as far as their constant, essentially printing of money through quantitative easing and artificially keeping the numbers where they are. Senator Toomey just said that a couple of weeks ago when he said, if not now, when? When is it that you're going to let the market begin to control? As Earl Evans